And I am back. Episode 21 of Voice of the Broken. Guys, we are here doing the thing. I said I was going to try to do an episode every week this year. So far, I'm on track to actually get that done. You know, it's a whole 3 weeks in, but it's happening. Last week, episode 20, we did a couple of updates, and one of those updates was a tattoo apprentice to be. And I had Zach find the guy in our Discord because he's a member of our Discord. He commented in our Discord. Let me back up because that's wrong information. He tagged me in our Voice of the Broken Discord. He's part of our To Be Better Discord. We were able to reach out to him. I got his email address, and I'm going to end up reaching out to him personally through my personal email to try to find out if he's interested in being on the show. I would assume that there is an interest there for people who want to be tattoo artists to listen to that kind of content and that kind of conversation. I do think there would be value there as well for other people, but I don't know if it's worth my time or worth wasting his time to create that content in terms of a Zoom call or just a voice chat, because I don't know if it's going to be listened to, and I don't want to create it and it not go anywhere. It feels like a waste to me. Also, for those of you who like this snazzy orange hoodie, safety orange, tobebetter.com, click the store. We have some new hoodies up. It's cold outside, guys. Might as well get warm. I'm going to just jump into this, try to keep this under an hour. I'm going to try to refrain from saying so if there's weird pauses, I'm going to have to go cut that. So you know what? I'm just going to run it. Let's just run it. Let's just see what happens. All right, so we have 3 emails today. This first one's 7 pages long. There's an editor's note here for a trigger warning of child loss. So if any of you are dealing with that or are triggered by that, just know that there's going to be a topic of that in this email. This email is titled Voices of the Broken Interview, ? This email starts, I'm sure there are some men that can relate to parts of this story, but the sad truth is no one really cares about the dad. On March 12th of 2015, I was gifted with a daughter. Sounds stupid or different, if you will, that since I was a young boy, I wanted a daughter. When I grew up and had kids, like I wanted the pink dresses, princess tiara, daddy-daughter dates, I wanted it all. I don't know where it came from or why I felt that way, just did. That's not the point, though. My beautiful little girl was born strong, feisty, and the most gorgeous thing I had ever held in my arms. I held pure and innocent love in my arms, and I never knew what that was until I met her. I had a son a few years prior, but this is not to say he was any less significant, because man, when that boy came into the world, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Now, I had someone that was going to look up to me to learn how to be a man. Back to where I was going with this. My ex-wife and I were in the middle of my career. My ex-wife and I were in the middle of my career change as I had just been laid off work. We were in the process of moving to where we had no friends, no family within 2 hours. It was a stressful part of life. She was about 2 months old when all of this happened. At 4 months old, my daughter got sick, which we assumed was just regular old cold, turned out to be RSV. My wife at the time had gone for her morning walk, and I was sitting there trying to feed my daughter as I normally did in the morning routine. I had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. I made the call to my wife and said, I need you to come home. I'm taking her to the emergency room because she was barely breathing. I loaded her up and we drove to the hospital. I carried my daughter into the hospital in her car seat and she was blue. She was dying. That hospital went apeshit. Everybody within 100 feet came to her rescue, and to this day, every one of them has my undying gratitude because they gifted me with time. Time I didn't realize at the moment was going to be so important. They stabilized her and transferred her to a larger hospital, better suited to take care of her needs. We were there for a week, and although she was stable, she wasn't getting any better sickness-wise. The doctors were concerned. They had every specialist they had come look at her, and all of them came up empty-handed. They said, we don't know what's wrong with her or how to fix it. I had a nursing friend who asked if they had tested her for spinal muscular atrophy or SMA. SMA is a rare disease, which is basically the infant version of ALS. They're born strong and healthy, and it slowly or quickly, depending on what stage they have, takes away the ability to use muscles, breathe independently, eat independently, or basically anything she should be able to do on her own. You guessed it, she had SMA type 1, the second fastest progressing type. I waited in that hospital after the test for a man to stand in front of me telling me that my daughter wasn't going to live past 2 years old. I lost it. I felt the weight of the entire world hit me in the chest. I could get into great depth about this part for hours. I've written blogs on it, but I want to get to the main point of the story you guys are looking for. We lived with a medically fragile child, trying everything in my power to protect her. We chose the palliative care route for her. At this time, there were no treatments for her, and we wanted to keep her as happy and healthy for as long as we could. I quit working so I could spend every moment with her. We made a bucket list for her, and her story went viral. We had millions of people who followed her journey, majority of them being positive and supportive. And then, as you both know, there are negative dickheads that have zero shit to do in their life other than spread toxicity. I was making memories with my daughter because I wasn't going to get to watch her grow up. I'm going to skip a lot and fast forward to 5/14/16. She was sick from nothing but a common cold, and she spent 24 hours fighting for her life, and ultimately on May 15th, 2016 at 3:30 a.m., my daughter's heart of gold stopped beating. I wouldn't have hesitated to switch places with her. I sat there apologizing to her because it was my job to protect her. I lost the majority of my faith in God when I got that diagnosis. I lost what little I had left the moment she quit breathing. The hardest thing I had to do was to load my daughter's body into a hearse, shut the door, and watch it drive off. I lost it. I broke down. I felt like my world had stopped and everyone else just kept moving. All of the people who followed her, family and friends, gave their condolence and then stopped. The time when we, in parentheses, needed her most, just stopped reaching out. I had never felt so alone in my life. Witnessing death is hard. Watching it happen to your daughter is unexplainable. After the initial blow of all this happening, I couldn't afford to live where we were and had to move back in with my parents. I got a new job and completely submerged myself in it. I worked 6 days a week for as long as they would let me stay. Some days 16 hours, drive home an hour and be back the next morning. I did this for about 6 months. I toned it all back when my body wouldn't physically take it anymore, but I still worked a lot. Where was your support system and your wife in all of this? Where were you as her support system in all of this? I mean, it sucks that you were going through it, but like, if you are married, you're a team. You have another person in this that's supposed to be your pillar and you're supposed to be theirs. And it sounds like if you weren't there during all of that time, your wife had to go through this on her own. He said, I was not a great person to be around. I was dealing with things in the only way I knew how, avoid them. Ignore it and grind on in hopes that it will stop hurting. One of my biggest problems is that no one cares about the dad. They all call and ask how mom's doing. Like, what the fuck? Was she not my daughter too? Like, I wanted to be strong and be the man, but legit no one outside of my parents cared. This is the stigma. I wanted to be strong and be the man. Should have started going to therapy, dude. People in general will always go to the mom because women tend to take it a whole lot harder when they lose a kid. Especially when it comes to like a miscarriage, because for men, it's not real yet. That's a whole conversation we could have, but, I still want to know where you were with your partnership in this. Did your wife not ask how you were doing? I have a whole lot of thoughts on all of this. People checking in and asking how you're doing is not going to make it okay. It may give you somebody to vent to, but if you have people in your life that are your friends, you should be able to initiate that conversation on your own. And that speaks for anyone, regardless of what you're going through. People they shouldn't have to pry information out of you. If you're having a hard time, you should be able to step up and go, hey, I'm having a really hard time. Can we talk for a minute? There's nothing wrong with it. And that doesn't make you less of a man. He then went on to say, it was all about mom. I started drinking, fighting with people for no reason, and just being an all-around asshole to be around. I didn't see it, but everyone else sure did. People told me I needed help over and over and over again, and eventually they just stopped trying. I can't say that I wouldn't have stopped either. There's only so long that someone can watch you circle and drain before you got to say fucking do something about it. So here's another thing. If you've been an asshole and you are avoiding everyone in your social circles, you're working 16 hours a day. How the fuck are people supposed to be there for you? How is your wife able to be there to be like, hey, babe, are you okay if you're at work from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed and you guys aren't communicating? If you've pushed all your friends away, how can your friends be like, hey, man, I can tell you're going through something. You're an asshole. You push them away. You just said it. You acknowledged it yourself. I remember I was at work, long shift welding like always. I suddenly didn't feel right. I physically felt something in my brain break. I could hear it. I used to be able to say my daughter's name with pride and admiration. I couldn't even utter the first letter anymore. On 2/18/17, I walked out of work, didn't say a thing to anyone, just left. I had full intentions of ending my life that day. I remember thinking, if there's a God, just take me out. End it because I have lost everything. Do it for me because I don't want to be a disappointment to my parents. I have lost my friends, family, support, and most importantly, my will to live. I sat in my car in my driveway and felt a rush of coolness. I don't even know how to describe it. It was an unexplainable peace. I felt my daughter. I felt everything that she wished I could be after she was taken. It's not even that I can verbally explain it to anyone. I just sat there. I don't know if my parents, my wife at the time, or anyone that loved me even knew how close they were to burying me. And I don't really think they would understand. I feel like they would judge me for it. I think that if you would have opened up and talked to people and engaged others in conversations when you needed it, everybody would have known exactly where you were at. And there would have been no guesswork. There would have been no, resentment because people aren't checking up on you. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you need help and you don't say, hey, I need help, it's no different than your wife saying, well, he should fucking know what I need without her saying anything. At that time, I knew it was time and I couldn't do it on my own anymore. I called and called and called, begging for someone to allow me to admit myself into a psychiatric hospital. Can we talk about the mental health issue in this country? I could not get anyone to admit me unless I physically said I was going to hurt myself or someone else. If I admitted wanting to harm myself, it was no longer voluntary and they could keep me as long as they wanted. I didn't want that. I was already struggling with the fact that I was appearing weak in my own mind, but asking for help. So I said, if a dump truck pulled out in front of me, I wouldn't swerve. That was enough to admit me, but keep it voluntary. I spent 4 weeks there, majority of which I don't remember. I left being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and manic depression. I do remember having pills thrown at me in the hopes that something would stick and fix me. Eventually some did, and I've been on them ever since. I have since divorced, remarried, have a blended family, and we had a child with each other, a girl. I can't explain how terrified I was and still am that something will happen to one of my children. So I am still a difficult person to live with. I have manic episodes. I have extreme trust issues. I lack communication skills, and I am just an all-around work in progress, but I am trying. You know what your problems are. So those aren't excuses anymore. You don't get to use those labels as a crutch to fall back on. You went through this. This is a horrible thing to go through, but you went through it. And you've had time to heal and process and work through your traumas and maybe get therapy and maybe find a social circle or a Facebook group for parents who lost children, whatever the case may be. But you've had ample time to work on yourself. You know what your shortcomings are. Now you need to fix your shortcomings. It doesn't matter what the scenario is. If you know what the issue is, it's up to you to fix it. It's not on other people. You then wrote, my wife is great to me. We are each other's best friends. I still don't have friends. I don't ever go out. I get everything I need from her. I am 10,000% content just being lazy with her on my days off, spending time with the kids. I have found a new career, one in which I wear a badge. I never thought that was possible for me. I have room to promote, goals, and places to go. You cannot rely on your person to be your everything. It's not fair to them because there's going to be boxes that they can't check off. And if they are trying to fill those roles to check those boxes off for you, it's going to strain your person. I understand not wanting to deal with people. There are times that I don't want to leave the house either, but I do have people outside of my immediate family that I can talk to when I want to. That is an issue that needs to be looked at deeper in your life. My wife and I have our moments, but ultimately at the end, we sit down and have a conversation about what went wrong and how to fix it. Our biggest hurdle is communication. We used to fight about all of our problems all the time. And we have now graduated to sitting on our bed, looking at each other, looking at each other in the face and saying, let's figure this out. And how can we fix it? Acknowledge each other's feelings and make a plan to avoid the triggers and work through it together, one day at a time. I have come so far, and I'll be damned if I go back to who I was. I worked so hard to get out of this state of mind, and I am proud of who I've become. But most of all, I hope she's proud of me. I'm sorry for the grammar and such. I'm not great at stuff like this unless I go over it 30 times. Thank you for what you guys do. I watch you guys frequently with my wife, and we relate to so much that you talk about. Keep doing you. So much love, and much love. I'm sorry that you went through this. This feels a whole lot like a venting email and not one that is telling us what you went through, like after the fact, on how you've healed and the work that you've done. And I mean, you did definitely talk about going to a mental institution and getting some meds. But what have you been doing since then to fix your mental health? What are you doing to mentor other fathers? Because as you said, nobody asks about the man. Have you maybe considered making a Facebook group or a TikTok page or a YouTube channel where you talk about the struggles that you went through, and maybe start building a community for other fathers who are struggling? Because as you said, nobody asks about the man. You have a life experience here. There's a whole lot of learning and life shit that you could be giving to other people. Just something to think about. I'm going to go on to the next email. There's not a whole lot in that one that I can get into. All right, this one's called Voice of the Broken. Seems to be the name of all of these. Hello there, and thank you for the opportunity for me to share my story with you. This email is 5 pages, guys. There are many stories that I can share, but this one stood out to me as one of my largest learning experience as a man, a husband, and a father. I would have never imagined that I would face such a harsh test to my marriage and my sanity and still hold many regrets from the struggle to this day. At the time, my family and I were living in Tennessee in a house that I rented from my parents. Money was tight as I was only making $18 per hour as an industrial mechanic. At the same time, we were rebuilding our life after moving away from a very toxic family dynamic. That dynamic is an entire saga in and of itself. I enjoy the way this is written so far. I was pulling as much overtime as I could, while at the same time pursuing my passion for acting and voice acting. And doing so, this meant long hours of studying, auditioning, working on set into the early hours of the morning, all while leaving my wife to work on her full-time job and take care of the kids. It was during this time that I became involved with a group of people that were also actors and professionals in the business. Because of that sense of validation that I received from the group, I began to neglect my duties as a husband and a father. There was one person in the group who consistently spoke with and messaged regularly as time went on, to the point where I became too uncomfortable and complacent to notice where boundaries were being crossed. I did not make any attempt to hide my friendship with this woman from my wife. However, I was too blinded by my own wants to realize that this was affecting my wife emotionally. Put a pin in that. We may come back to that. This incredibly inappropriate dynamic was even more exacerbated by the financial difficulties my wife and I were facing, on top of the effects of COVID-19. At caring for a newborn son at that time, and you have a recipe for a marriage that is literally on the cusp of failing into pieces. Fortunately and unfortunately, I was the one who nearly ended up falling to pieces from all of this. I maintained this friendship with this woman for quite a long time, roughly a year and a half, before events came to a head and my world literally came crashing down around me. At this point in time, my wife had become very emotionally and physically distant from me, as we decided to move back to South Carolina due to the fact that I could not keep up with the bills. And she felt that I was no longer interested in maintaining a strong enough partnership with her to help her feel safe, secure, and valid as a person, and rightfully so. I allowed my friend and even one of her other friends to manipulate me into believing that my wife was in the wrong and that she was toxic for trying to hold me to the most basic standard of being a decent partner for her. I will fully admit that I was the one in the wrong, and that I was the root cause for all of this heartache and pain. I felt like a failure on so many levels during this. I felt like I failed providing for my family because of my mismanagement of my finances. I felt like I failed as a partner because I could not communicate effectively with my wife, when in reality, I was more concerned with what I wanted than what she or our kids wanted or needed. I felt like a failure as a person because I spent all of that time trying to pursue a true hobby and passion of mine, and yet still I gained nothing but exhaustion, negativity, and rejection from the very thing that was supposed to be a source of joy in my life. This is the downside of turning hobbies into work, like trying to pursue your hobby as a career. And we can get on the relationship aspect of all of this in a minute, but I just want to touch on that aspect. Photography was one of those things that I started doing in 2009 because of a motorcycle accident. At the time I was doing powerlifting. I was fairly strong. I was like 280 pounds, but I was beefy. Actually, so much so that the paramedic that got me and the doctor that reconstructed my arm both told me that it was the size, my sheer muscle and size of my body at the time of my accident is what saved my life. But I had a whole lot of rehabilitation that I had to go through physical therapy. They had to reconstruct my wrist. I broke my femur and tailbone. I was all messed up. But during that time frame, I had weight limits and restrictions. And when I started being able to tattoo again, a client came into the tattoo shop and was taking pictures of his girlfriend and me tattooing her. And I really wanted to learn about photography at that point. It was something that was new that I'd never looked into, and I spent a whole lot of time with cameras in my hand trying to, I carried a fucking camera bag with me everywhere I went, and I had my camera on me always. And I took pictures of everything I could think of just to try to learn how to do it. And I eventually got fairly good at photography, and I started shooting models and landscapes and getting prints hung up in businesses, and people were buying my work. And then I started doing boudoir photography, and it became a nightmare. I got to the point where, like, shooting weddings, shooting boudoir, doing all of the photography that I was doing, I was becoming resentful to the hobby. And I should have never turned that into a job. I should have kept it purely as an art form for myself so that I can enjoy doing these things. I'm not saying that that's what happened with you, but every time I've turned a passion into a job, which has happened a lot, I tend to become resentful towards it. However, that's not been the case every time because this was a hobby that turned into a career and I fucking love it. Tattooing was something that I always wanted to do. So that wasn't a hobby that became a passion, that became a career. It was a passion that went straight to career. But that's a whole different conversation, I guess. Anyways, with the way everything worked out so far, it just so happened that my wife was afforded the opportunity to move to South Carolina before I was able to, due to obligations of my job at the time. This was where I was left alone for 3 months, roiling in my feelings of depression, failure, and emotional tryst. And like the absolute fool that I was, I still continued to maintain contact with the woman who was trying to convince me that I should abandon my family and pursue my own desires. Little did I know that the single most terrifying event of my life had yet to occur. 3 weeks before I was supposed to finish my work and move to South Carolina, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law while at work. She was in absolute hysterics to the point where I could barely understand the words she was saying. But then, that's when she said the words that pierced my heart like an ice-cold dagger. My wife had been in a car crash. As I'm writing this, I'm struggling to find the accurate word to describe that feeling. Defeat, despair, hopelessness, dread, any of those adjectives are not nearly strong enough to describe that utter sense of fear and loss in that moment. Through all of the strife, anger, and frustration, I still wanted to be with my wife and be happy with each other. And in that moment, I had no idea if I would have that chance. You were also in a whole other state, which would have taken you time to get to her. It's rough. I had to ask my mother to give me money so that I could rush down there and make sure she was okay. And thankfully she was. Despite rolling the vehicle she was driving, she only suffered a laceration to the back of her head and multiple bruises. The passenger riding with my wife unfortunately did not survive her injuries. To this day, that event is a huge point of trauma with my wife, and I do the best I can to aid in supporting her healing from it. I arrived at her parents' house the same evening, happy to see that she only had minor injuries, but I continued to be such a hopeless fool. And in the utterly corrupted state I was in, I allowed the venomous influence of my friend to affect me shamefully. I did not even consider the mental state that my wife was in. Looking back on this, I am still in disbelief that I would have the audacity to dare ask my wife at that moment if she would be open to consider a polyamorous relationship with my friend. I did not even consider the multiple instances of blatant disrespect and absolute rudeness that my friend showed towards my wife. which obviously caused her to vehemently dislike my friend. I was so blinded by my own stupidity that I did not even realize how completely inappropriate of a question that was. You know what you're not doing in this entire email? You're not taking accountability for your shit. You keep saying your friend this, your friend that, your friend this, your friend that, and you are acknowledging the fact that you did have an inappropriate relationship, but you're blaming all of this on the friend, the toxic, venomous friend that did these things. You did these things. The toxic, venomous friend was somebody that you chose to have in your life, and whether they were manipulating you or not, their actions are their own. Your choice to have them in your life and to continue to allow this to happen falls to your shoulders and your shoulders only. There's a whole lot of victim mentality in this, and a whole lot of it's not really my fault. It's other people that were manipulating me, and that's not how life works. So I would like you to rewrite this email. You don't have to send it to me. I've already read the email. I'm still reading the email, but you should rewrite it and take accountability and own your shit. Read it and then delete it if you need to, but write it so that it's clear and where your fucking obligations were, where your shortcomings were, and where the blame falls on you in these things, because the actions of your person, your friend, could have been put to a kibosh at any point had that been what you wanted. You enjoyed what was going on. You encouraged it, or it would have stopped at some point. You probably strung the other person along. I'm sure there was conversations about how you're not happy in your relationship and one day you'll probably leave your wife and all of that nonsense. Own your shit. You don't have to pay a pittance. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, but at least be accountable that these are the things that I did. Yeah, I did that shit. I was a shitty human being. I'm not that person anymore. Some more time passed. My pattern of selfish behavior continued until the day that we had put her dog to sleep. That was the event that forced me to realize that everything that I had done up to that point was influenced only by what I wanted. There you go. There it is. That's what I was looking for. I did not consider the effects of my decisions had on her or our kids. Even through all of that sorrow, she felt for losing one of her favorite pets. She confronted me directly about all of the mistakes that I made. She was furious with me and in the way that she laid everything out, and it was completely justified. Later that evening, after burying our beloved pet, she and I had a very lengthy discussion about my mistakes, how I made her feel, and the way that I did not even seem to realize that I was being so foolishly selfish. The very next day, I made the choice to cease all contact with my friend and anyone that she was associated with and focus on rebuilding the life with my wife and children once again. I still think you need to rewrite this email. Those events took place nearly 2.5 years ago, and this year will mark our 7th anniversary. My wife and I both worked hard to mend the wounds that I caused, and we continue to do so, but now we face our problems as partners in life. There is still so much more that we are working on, but we are now a strong couple who support and love each other in the best way we can, even on our worst days. I sincerely hope that this crazy saga of mine will help someone somehow. Thank you for everything that you do. I will always work as hard as I can to be a son, father, and a husband, to be a strong voice of the broken, and to be better with much love and respect. I want you to rewrite this email. You don't have to send it. You probably won't do it, but you should. You should rewrite this email and be 100% honest with yourself. Because that's what you need. You need to own your shit. That extreme accountability is how you're going to not repeat these behavior patterns in the future. The hurt that you caused your wife, if you are remorseful, own your shit. You've already worked through all of it. Take true accountability, dude. I know it's not easy. It's hard. It's so much easier to blame other people for our shortcomings. You definitely took some accountability there, but I feel like you could do a better job at it. All right, this is the first time we've ever done this. I don't know if we'll ever do it again. This is only 4 pages. This is going to be a short episode. This is a wife writing in for her husband's story. It's not a long one, 4 pages. I have not read this email yet. And depending on how this email goes will determine if I ever read another one from a woman for her husband. I am, however, contemplating opening emails up for women for the voice of the broken, because I think another perspective of a man's life from the woman who loves him might be a benefit. I don't know yet. Let's see how this goes. I just want to start off by saying thank you both for everything that you do. Your content has helped me and my husband in so many ways, and we listen to your podcast every day that we drive to work. It's an hour both ways. It has not only given us hope, but there are other couples like us out there. It has not only given us hope that there are other couples like us, but that there's nothing we can't figure out together. I don't know why I had such a hard time with that one. Okay. That being said, I'm writing in because we were listening to an episode where Chris was asking for men's stories, and my husband's response that would be so awesome, but I don't think I've done enough. When I tell you that this statement blew my mind because he is an inspiration to me without even knowing it. Before I met him, I honestly wasn't even sure people were capable of true change. But when I tell you this man has changed and did a complete 360, pretty sure she meant 180 from the thing. I was going to say the same thing. She meant 180. To become the husband and father his family needs, I'm not exaggerating. Let me elaborate. My husband, cut that. I met my husband in January of 2021. We were both severe alcoholics, both in dark states and in dark places in life. His biological dad eliminated himself when he was 4, and his mother was extremely abusive towards him growing up, and he became a meth addict at the heartbreaking age of 16. Sadly, all of his cousins and uncles and his dad's sides were users, and so was his dad. He never knew what a real man looked like, and he was broken. He got off the drugs, but would still immerse himself in his fake friends, video games, and alcohol. He would wake up, get on his game with his buddies, and not get off of his game until bedtime most days while drinking throughout the day. Anything that interfered with this was a problem, and most of the time that problem was me. We're going to pause for just a minute. Peaches and I have said on the podcast a lot, the most important decision in life is going to be who you marry. That immediately comes to mind while reading that paragraph. I want to point out, though, that you said he never knew what a real man looked like and he was broken. I'm going to take just a quick second to shamelessly plug my book. I wrote a book. It's on Amazon. It'll be linked in the description of this video, called No One Is Coming to Save You by Christopher Burkett. It is 165 short pages. It is not a long book, but it has a whole lot of information on what I believe it is to be a man, not a male, not a boy, a man. I talk about what it is to be a husband, a father. I talk about rites of passages, labels. There's a whole lot of things that I go over in that book. It's very blunt, very easy to understand. And obviously, because it's mine, I'm going to promote it and say you should read it. All right. He had severe anger issues and no self-control. That is an emotional deregulation. The alcohol only made it worse. Of course it did. Of course it did. Let's just say he was not very nice to me. That probably makes you wonder why I was even with him. At this point, he was physically loyal and said he loved me and would spend time with me. That's how low my self-worth was. I think we were both just kind of together because we so desperately wanted to be loved. We have also talked about that at length on the podcast, about self-worth and what you will tolerate when you don't have it. It's been almost 3 years since then, and I don't even see that man when I look at my husband. He only drinks a few beers to decompress sometimes now and has put so much work into his anger and patience. I have never seen him lose his cool when it comes to our little girl, and I don't think he ever will. I don't think I ever will. She is his baby girl, and pride and joy. He's happier now, smiles more, and is excited to keep growing. Aside from overcoming his anger, he has also overcome a corn addiction, and we have found our faith. The trust and love in our relationship has gotten stronger, and our intimacy has never been better. He now makes me feel like I'm the only woman that can and will ever do it for him, and he reminds me every day how grateful he is for me. I want to know what the catalyst was. What was the change? Like you can't go from he was abusive as fuck and we were only together because we needed someone to love us to everything is great now. Like, where's the catalyst? What made the change happen? Because the men who are in the position that your husband was in is looking for that thing. What is the change? Why did this happen? He works hard as heck to provide and make sure we have what we need and the bills are paid and our daughter won't have a childhood like ours. He still plays his game, but instead of all day, every day, it's a couple hours, a few days a week. We have date nights and we prioritize each other daily. And recently, we even went on our first short family vacation and had a blast. We recently started doing the check-ins and trying to recorrect each other if we get a little too heated and having more grace with each other, taking notes from a few different episodes. Tonight, he did our daughter's whole bedtime routine with her and told me to get my things together. We have to have a me night because he could tell I needed it. So while I have a minute, I'm doing this for him. My life has truly become something I only ever thought I would dream about, and I wouldn't trade him for anyone else. He's a real life inspiration and proof that anyone can change if they want it badly enough. We will both continue listening to you guys and continue to grow. Thank you again, and God bless you both. Update, I think it's important to note that we were 21 when we met, and we are 24 and 25 now with a 2.5-year-old daughter. I know how much you guys love details. You do, huh? Then where's the details of the catalyst? What made him change? What was the thing that made him wake up one day and go, okay, the video games are not serving me anymore. Corn is cheating. I'm taking away this attention that I could be given to my woman. My emotional unregulation and screaming and yelling and berating and treating her poorly is unacceptable and unbecoming of me as a man. What changed all of those things? What made him go, I'm going to be better? I have my stories, and I've told a lot of them on the podcast, and I may get into them as a rehashing on these podcasts, but I've had my midlife crises. I've had my quarter life crises. I've had moments where, I was a complete fucking mess, ugly crying, having breakdowns, and realizing that I'm the fucking problem. And ultimately, I think that rock bottom is where everyone needs to hit in order to truly change their life. I love that he did the 180. I love that your life is better. You guys are still very young, 24 and 25. You don't really have your life together yet, but it sounds like you're getting it there. And I hope that this continues for the next 50 years with the two of you guys. Maybe that 21 to 25 that you guys are talking about, or 21 to 24, however old he is now, was just a growing up period. Maybe he realized that he was still doing little boy shit, playing video games and getting fucked up all the time. I don't know. This is a short ass episode, guys, because after cuts, we're going to be under 40 minutes. I'm done though. So with that being said, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys on episode 22.